What is courage? Some may think of courage as having only a single definition.
People understandably ran for their lives from the blast sites. Others went toward the smoke and the screams.
Yet, if one were to venture deeper into the concept, they would perceive that there are multiple layers of courage one can portray, thus revealing the many concepts it entails.
A simple act of kindness, the courage and determination of our men and women serving in Afghanistan.
Some layers of courage can even come off to be much more courageous than others, requiring different forms of it to create these identifiable concepts as seen throughout the novel In the Time of the Butterflies and expressed in the real world. Courage is needed to perform many tasks, such as recollection of past yet devastating events. Most find it hard to speak of such tragic events that have occurred throughout their pastime, becoming incompetent of discussing the subject at all. Yet others may find the innermost strength to discuss such topics. Death of a loved one is a very hard topic for one to converse about. As one of the Morales sisters, Dede is frequently confronted by others to discuss, specifically the horrid death of her sisters. Although this is an extremely difficult topic for Dede to talk about, she is able to face this trouble, portraying no signs of weakness, even though she later informs the reader of the frequent hardship of recalling this tragedy. Therefore, this undeniable strength Dede obtains greatly portrays a layer of courage, a layer in which one is able to appear strong and act in such a way that they portray no delicacy, even if a mental weakness is deteriorating them due to such a tragedy. In the past few years, others have portrayed this form of courage, appearing strong throughout their discussion of their hardships. A man by the name of Captain Richard Phillips has had various press conferences to discuss his tragedy and speaks freely about this scarring life occurrence. Captain Phillips had served as captain on the MV Merrick, Alabama during its hijacking by Somali pirates in April 2009. He had sacrificed himself for the sake of his crew and listened to the orders of the pirates, isolating himself with the Somalis in a lifeboat. Here he endured physical and mental fatigue, being abused and treated horridly. Fortunately, he was saved days later and is able to openly speak with others about this topic. He even has written a book to reflect upon his troubles, even though it always informs him of his traumatic experience and the treatment he received.
I'd wake up at 5 in the morning crying my eyes out.
Phillips talked to some of the Navy SEALs who saved him, and they said it wasn't surprising after his experience, trapped in a lifeboat, staring down death.
And he says, don't try and stop it, don't try and tamp it down, don't try and thing. I said, okay, and so the next day it happened, I didn't try and stop it, I just let it flow naturally, and I never had it again.
Therefore, this act of courage reveals a layer much like that in which Dede obtains. Both of them are able to talk about a subject freely, even though it may pain them inside. This requires much strength and courage of a person, and reveals how maturely they are able to handle tough situations, yet retain their composure. This act of discussion is a much more courageous act than facing one's fears. Hence, one is able to openly and willingly face this fear every day through discussion. It also requires much internal strength, different than that needed for facing one's fears, to over and over again discuss an event that has affected them so tragically. However, this recollection of their strength in turn brings much admiration towards them from others. People also tend to idolize those who face their fears. One can portray a layer of courage involving nerve and confrontation through their confrontation of their fears. As Maria Teresa discusses on page 227, she feels an overwhelming sense of fear and is paranoid to the extent that daily occurrences cause her to go into a threatened and scared state. As she exclaims, "The fear is the worst part. Every time I hear footsteps coming down the hall or the clink of the key turning the lock, I'm tempted to curl up in a corner like a hurt animal, whimpering, wanting to be safe." Yet she faces this fear, deciding to put it aside, uncovering a strength she obtains and which allows her to stand out from the others, going against the influence of the overpowering government and staying true to herself. As she states, "But I know if I do that, I'll be giving into a low part of myself, and I'll feel even less human. And that is what they want me to do. Yes, that is what they want me to do." Throughout this short excerpt, the intelligence Maria obtains becomes evident, coupled with the courage she has to stand up for herself and not give in to this horrid leadership. No matter how hard it gets, she always is able to maintain her witty and courageous composure and outlook. Therefore, a layer of courage one can portray by facing their fears reveals their true persona and a strength that can be hard and rare to obtain. Recently, a girl by the name of Michelle Knight had forgiven the man, Ariel Castro, who had held her and other captive for nearly a decade in his house. To face the fear of confronting the man who kidnapped her and forgive him requires a lot of guts. By doing so, Knight portrayed a tremendous amount of courage, letting everyone know of her acceptance of the man who not only robbed her of nearly a decade of her life, but also abused her. Yet, she feels great relief after forgiving him, showing that the courage needed was totally worth it. The courage she needed to do so indirectly allowed her to move on with her life, and no longer have this thought of Castro in the back of her.
But you will face hell for eternity. I can forgive you.
Contrastingly, the courage she needed in order to stay strong the entire time and remain hope requires a greater extent of courage than the forgiveness did, or at least a differing layer. This layer is similar to that of the type of courage needed to sacrifice oneself, performing selfless acts as she had to stay alive and help the other two women who were victims held captive with her. Although facing the fear in which both Minerva and Michelle had done is undoubtedly courageous, proving both to be independent and brave, there are other acts, such as sacrifice, in which undoubtedly require more courage.
Another way a person can display courage is when they give up what they want for the protection and safety of others. During the rebellion of the Dominican Republic, if one got caught supporting forces that opposed the nation's leader Trujillo, it is very likely that they would get killed along with their entire family. As a supporter of the rebellion, Minerva has to choose between keeping her beloved son or continuing to fight for what she believes in. Minerva had to give up her child to Petrea because she was too involved in the rebellion, which shows courage because she was doing what's right even though it is very hard for her.
We could do much more.
It is obvious that it hurt Minerva to give up her own child, but she knew it was to protect her son and was willing to do anything for his safety. Although it can be one of the hardest things to do, sacrifice can be used to demonstrate a tremendous amount of courage. Minerva acts solely of selflessness in this moment, as people often do in the world, as shown by the teachers at Sandy Hook Elementary School.
We do have the breaking news of a shooting at an elementary school in Newtown, Connecticut, and you heard that right. It is unthinkable, an elementary school.
Though some think of teachers solely as educators for their children, some go above and beyond to act as heroes in conflicting situations. Teachers Victoria Soto and Anne-Marie Murphy are remembered as heroes for acting fully of selflessness and sacrificing themselves in order to save the children in their classrooms. Victoria rushed her students into a corner, allowing the gunman to kill herself instead of the children. Anne-Marie Murphy was also killed, shielding herself over the students in an effort to protect them instead of herself. These incredible acts of selflessness and courage shown by the remarkable teachers on that day are similar to the ones portrayed by Minerva when she gave up her own child to keep him safe, because they were both giving up what they wanted in order to protect their children. Sacrifice is a layer of courage that takes great strength to show, but can be rewarding for others in the end. Sacrifice is arguably the most courageous thing a person can demonstrate because it's the only true representation of selflessness a person can pursue. Sacrifice is nearly impossible to commit to, but it shows how far one is willing to go in order to stand up for what they believe in. Even at a young age, Minerva, third of the Mirabal sisters, displayed a great amount of courage for standing up against the authorities for what she believed in. The Dominican Republic's leader, Trujillo, is infamous for getting women to fall for him and then using them until he has had enough. As a very intelligent young woman, Minerva doesn't fall for his tricks and slaps him when he tries to pull her close. She thought Trujillo's actions were inappropriate and did not hesitate to slap him away, although he was a country's leader and technically had a lot of power over her. By doing this, Minerva demonstrated another layer of courage, the courage to react when one is being threatened and stand up for a person's rights. Even though Trujillo has more power over Minerva, she is able to overcome the fear of getting hurt and stand up for what she believes in, which shows an undeniable amount of courage. Just through one movement, Minerva showed great courage and demonstrated her physical and mental ability in support of what she actually believes in. She believed even that Trujillo was the nation's leader, he did not have the right to use her, so without thinking twice, she chose to go with her own beliefs and stand up for what she wanted. The strength to believe in one's rights and fight for a man's natural freedom show yet another layer of great courage. After more than 300 girls were captured in Nigeria, moms of the girls stood up against the government to fight to get their children back. In the country of Nigeria, the women are usually suppressed by the government, and after the government and army did not do anything to help the captured girls, the moms decided to take a stand and fight for themselves. Some marched and others rode 30,000 miles on motorcycles to find their daughters and get them back. This shows not only heroism, but also a monumental amount of courage to go to such great lengths in order to stand up for what you believe in, even after the government refused to help.
They are alive.
Yeah.
Right. If they are alive, they can be found.
Amen.
If the will of the government and the military is there, they can be.
These mothers' dedication and determination to stand up for what they believe in reflects similar to the thoughts of Minerva when she stood up for what she wanted and slapped Trujillo in the face. Both the mothers of the Nigerian girls and Minerva are both physically fighting for what they believe in. Some may consider to be acts of courage have changed throughout time. Selfless acts have become overshadowed by acts of lesser degrees performed by celebrities. The idea of courage in itself has changed to common people because of the media's demonstrations of courage involving celebrities. If a famous person performs a courageous act, this act becomes more recognized by all. Yet if a normal human performs this courageous act, they will be lucky to even be acknowledged. Though courage is not portrayed to obtain an award, the recognition that some celebrities get from performing semi-courageous acts greatly overshadows the unseen examples for everyday courage. For example, popular show host Oprah Winfrey got a lot of praise for joining a cause to find justice for Trayvon Martin, a boy who was innocently walking around in Florida and was killed. Every day, people across over 100 cities in America have stood against the same campaign to get justice for the boy without turning any heads, but Oprah Winfrey makes headlines with standing up for the same case. It is a courageous act for all. It is no different when Oprah performs it than what an average person does. In the world today, this issue is very relevant because when one celebrity performs an act, it is the same as what a normal person does. The celebrity is able to receive much higher praise.